Good work, men.
Thank you, sir. You've been doing good work, too, General.
Thank you, my man. Well, General Greene, here it is, laid out before you. New York, as defended by the American Army.
General Washington, I can't help but think all this digging is useless.
So?
I've inspected up and down the east and west shores of this island, and I've counted 50 separate places where the British could easily disembark all their troops within a few hours. The qualities that make this place such an excellent harbor are the very qualities that make it impossible to defend.
I was hoping you would have thought of something I didn't already know. For instance, how to defend it after all.
Well, the danger is how easily our troops could be trapped here with the British fleet to keep us from transporting ourselves across the East River, let alone the Hudson. We could be forced to surrender within days, weeks anyway.
Days. Hours, perhaps. They have only to notice the heights of Brooklyn across the river and place a battery of cannon there and bombard us into submission.
Well, you seem to have their strategy all thought out.
General Greene, if it were left to me, I would abandon the city of New York immediately, strengthen the forts of the Hudson, and place this army where it could do some good, in New Jersey.
And why don't you?
Because I am only a general, and I am ruled by Congress, and Congress is ruled by the people. I'm not sure the people could bear the loss of New York. I know Congress could not. How long do you think I would remain in command of this army if I made no effort at all to defend New York?
Yes, I see.
Mr. Lee writes to me that the New York delegation has not yet declared itself on the question of independence. If they found their city undefended by Congress's army, how disposed do you think they would be to put themselves permanently into a confederation of independent states?
Not likely.
You see, in a country with Congresses and parliaments, generals must be politicians.
Then the American army is all the more fortunate to have you at its head, sir.
But am I fortunate to be doing it? Now, there's a question, General Greene. But as long as someone has to defend this indefensible city, I'd rather it were me than the sort of general who would actually believe it could be done.
What will you do?
I will keep my army intact and watch for opportunity. You must understand, so far all our victories have depended on the stupidity of the enemy. If they are at all alert, it will take all my generalship and the best advice of my best men just to keep us from being surrounded and trapped. As it is, we'll probably end up cut off in Connecticut, and if they're energetic, Philadelphia itself will be threatened.
That would wake up the Congress.
As long as they hurry and declare our independence. Once that is done, there's no turning back, no matter how bleak things look.
Then I'm sorry to tell you the news. Congress has just postponed considering a declaration of independence until the 1st of July.
One would think that Congress wanted to lose the war the way they act sometimes. Well, Nathaniel, we'll leave the nation to Congress. My first responsibility is this army, such as it is. As long as this army survives, we have hope of winning the war. So, as we plan to defend this impossible island, let's remember to plan for the escape of the army, if the need comes. America can survive without New York, but not without this army.
Well, gentlemen, I think our little committee on writing the Declaration has done rather well. We have here the basic outline of an excellent declaration.
The ideas are excellent. I must confess, I dread our task now of writing it.
So do I, Mr. Livingston. I can't imagine anything worse than a declaration written by a committee of 5 men. Therefore, I move that we appoint a very small subcommittee to actually write down a draft of the declaration following our outline.
Fine with me, as long as I'm not on it. You, of course, must do it, Mr. Franklin.
Hey, this is not supposed to be poor Richard's declaration. It will take more elegant writing than mine. Besides, gentlemen, I am very old and tired, and I deserve better than to be badgered into writing declarations at my advanced age. I quite prefer to sit back and utter words of wisdom from time to time. It's the role that suits me best.
Mr. Adams, then?
I'd rather not, Mr. Livingston.
Why not Mr. Adams and Mr. Jefferson?
Me?
Mr. Jefferson, why do you always seem so surprised when anyone calls on you?
This isn't a mere essay, Mr. Franklin. This is a declaration that will stand for all time as the foundation of a nation. I have no confidence that I'm a fit writer for such a document.
Why, then you shall have Mr. Adams to help you.
I can't see any reason why I should have to be involved.
All those in favor of Mr. Adams and Mr. Jefferson producing the first draft of the Declaration?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Nay. The nays have it.
What? 3 of us said aye, and 2 of you said nay.
The chairman of this committee, which happens to be me, firmly believes that a majority of the committee oppose the motion. Isn't that right, Mr. Adams?
It's not going to work, Tom. They'll just poll the members. I think they've got us.
All right, then. I'm not afraid to do my duty. This committee is adjourned until... when?
Until you write your draft of the Declaration. You can notify us, and we'll meet to read it.
Adjourned until then.
Good evening. Good evening, gentlemen.
A very good meeting, Tom. Good luck on getting along with Mr. Adams. He's a tyrant.
Thanks very kindly, Ben. You may go home and take a nap.
Well, John.
I can't tell you how delighted I am that you will be writing this declaration.
On the contrary, it is my firm opinion that you should take the articles and write the draft. Then I'll advise you as best I can in case you overlook something.
Patent nonsense. Begging your pardon. You will write the draft, not I.
Why me? Why, when I have done my best to be decently quiet and invisible in the Congress, why has everyone decided that I have some mystical, unavoidable connection with the writing of this declaration?
I will tell you why. First, you are a Virginian gentleman, and I am a fire-breathing radical from Massachusetts. Second, you are a Southerner, so you can write the passages on slavery, and I cannot without being hanged by Mr. Rutledge. Third, I have been so obnoxious in my eagerness to promote this declaration that any draft I wrote would be ripped to shreds by the Congress, just for the sheer pleasure of undoing my work. And fourth, and this would be reason enough if there were no other, I have a very high opinion of the elegance of your pen, and no good opinion at all of my own. You will write it, Mr. Jefferson, and it will be excellent, and it will pass this Congress with a minimum of change.
Is that a commandment or a prophecy, Mr. Adams?
A prediction. Your words will accomplish my purpose better than my own words ever could. I ask you, Tom, I beseech you, write the words that make America free.
I'll try.
That's good enough for me.
And how's the writing of the proposed declaration coming along, Mr. Franklin?
Very well, Mr. President. In fact, excellently, because Mr. Adams and Mr. Jefferson are doing it.
Well, John Adams, how goes the writing of the declaration?
It is going to be a masterpiece, because Tom Jefferson is writing it.
Mr. President,
Oh, Mr. Hughes of North Carolina.
gentlemen of Congress, all this discussion is pointless as long as the people of North Carolina are reluctant to commit themselves to severing relations with His Majesty. I can't see what good any sort of draft of a declaration will do us.
Well said. Will the gentleman yield?
For what purpose does Mr. Samuel Adams wish to interrupt me?
To discuss the question of reluctance of the people of North Carolina.
I'll yield to a question.
When was the last time, sir, that you actually asked the people of North Carolina how they feel about independency?
Now, how can I ask every living soul in the colony a question like...
I have asked. I have written letters, and I have received answers. Would you like to hear them?
I'm always eager to hear what the good people of North Carolina have to say.
I have several fascinating documents here. To wit, the City Council of Wilmington, North Carolina, has voted a resolution calling for independency. I have letters from citizens of Fayetteville, LaGrange, Durham. Look at these, sir. I think you know their names. The aldermen of Hereford, Eddington, Murfreesboro, Warrington, all have resolved in favor of independence. Greensboro, Raleigh itself. Look at this, sir.
Why, I had no notion these people felt this way.
Listen to this one. I cannot understand why Congress delays in declaring this an independent nation. I can only assume that it is due to the reluctance of the middle colonies, for it is certain the whole South longs for independence.
Who wrote that?
President of the North Carolina Assembly.
Oh, my.
Haven't you been getting any mail from home, sir?
I knew how the people felt 3 months ago, but it is plain enough that their opinions have changed greatly. It is done. I will abide by it.
Do I take it that you mean you will vote for independency?
I am here to represent the people of North Carolina. I will vote for any reasonable declaration. Heaven knows I want independence. If my constituents wanted to, I'd be a fool to vote against it, now wouldn't I?
Come in.
Am I late?
Late. Is this a meeting?
I invited Mr. Franklin to come hear your reading of the draft.
Is anyone else coming?
Am I not enough? I come all the way here to your rooms at my advanced age. So now will you kindly read me the declaration?
You read it, John.
What? Suddenly shy? Oh, very well. When in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for a people to advance from that subordination in which they have hitherto remained, and to assume among the powers of the earth the equal and independent station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to change.
Oh, now, Tom, don't misunderstand me, but I don't believe you're right to say we are advancing from subordination. I think you should express the idea that we're inherently equal as a nation to any other.
Well, that's what I thought I said. Go on. Read on. I'll try a different version of that while you read.
We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and independent.
All men are created as infants who are completely dependent.
Strike and independent.
All men are created equal, that from that equal creation they derive rights inherent and unalienable.
Oh, Tom, I don't mean to be troublesome.
What now?
Never mind. I don't want to overburden you.
What Ben means to say is that the word is inalienable.
That is not at all what I was going to say.
The word is unalienable anyway.
If we're going to argue about grammar...
I can see this is going to be a long night.
But it's an excellent draft, Tom. Excellent.
Excellent. Well, there's not a sentence in it that one of you hasn't argued with.
We're laboring to make an excellent document into a perfect one.
God help us.
Don't worry, he will. Now, hear the word preservation. It seems superfluous. Just life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Much more elegant, Simplicity is perfection. You may write that down.
That to secure these ends, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed.
Very good.
That whenever any form of government shall become destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness.
Now, you see, Tom, this is superb. I wouldn't change a word.
There is no apostrophe in its.
John.
Sorry.
Here, how's this for the opening sentence? When, in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws, etc., etc.
Excellent. Perfect. Dissolving political bands is so much better than advancing like school children from one class to the next. Makes us sound like a nation already, and not an adolescent child screaming that he is quite grown up. So please take off his bib.
Tom, I think you've got a document here that will stir men's hearts from one end of America to the other.
Don't be so moderate, John. I think this declaration will stir men's hearts all over the world.
This will not do at all. Not at all.
I pray you, Mr. Rutledge, to explain why not.
This passage, Mr. Jefferson, you accuse King George of cruel war against human nature itself, violating its most sacred right of life and liberty in the persons of a distant people who never offended him, captivating and carrying them into slavery in another hemisphere, or to incur miserable death in their transportation thither. This piratical warfare, the opprobrium of infidel powers, is the warfare of the Christian king of Great Britain, determined to keep open a market where men should be bought and sold. He has prostituted his negative for suppressing every legislative attempt to prohibit or restrain his execrable commerce.
The very next part accuses him of trying to stir up slave revolt.
Mr. Jefferson, no Southern delegate will vote for a document that uses such language to refer to the Christian care and guidance we give these benighted black Africans.
In the name of heaven, Mr. Rutledge, do you mean that you will fight for the freedom of white men, and yet hypocritically continue the practice of enslaving black men?
It is the burden of the white man to care for the inferior races and provide them with suitable employment.
How can you call yourself a Christian, sir?
How can you call yourself a Virginian?
Strike the passage, Tom.
Never.
If you don't, Tom, the committee will. It is more important for America to become a free nation. That is the vital issue now. We can settle the question of slavery later.
It will haunt us in years to come. We will bear our independence with shame until freedom is equally offered to every man in this nation.
For once I must say I find Mr. Franklin to be more reasonable than you, Tom. Strike the passage
And you'll vote for the declaration, Mr. Rutledge?
I won't. I think the whole thing is a mistake. But the others might. It's dead certain with that passage in there, there's not a Southern delegate who'll support it.
Consider the passage gone. We appreciate your wise counsel. Keep your mouth shut, Tom.
Order. Order, gentlemen. On the first day of July, 1776, the Congress of the United Colonies is now in session. We're meeting today as a committee of the whole to vote on the Virginia Resolution of Independence. Now, you understand that if we approve the Declaration of Independence as a committee, then we must vote again as the whole of Congress on the same matter.
Mr. President,
What is this?
if it please this Congress, I am Dr. Witherspoon of New Jersey.
Well, this Congress is delighted that you are Dr. Witherspoon of New Jersey. Now, what is your business here?
Why, to be one of you, and Mr. Stockton and Mr. Hopkinson, who are with me. Word reached our assembly that our delegates were voting against independence, and so I have here official documents from the assembly recalling our former delegates and placing Mr. Stockton, Mr. Hopkinson, and me in Congress in order to vote for independence.
Well done. You've arrived just in time.
Mr. President, Mr. Dickinson of Pennsylvania.
I realize how futile it is for me to speak again, seeing that this Congress is determined on a course as foolish and reckless as this. But may I speak one last time to try to persuade this Congress against a declaration of independence?
Is there any objection? Then go ahead, Mr. Dickinson.
Gentlemen, you know that I was one of the first men in America to speak loudly and to commit myself publicly to the course of action that has led to this war with Great Britain. You know that in my heart, I have long regarded America as a free and independent nation. No one loves America more than I, or longs more for our success in battle and for our final emergence as a free people. But this declaration at this time is foolish and dangerous. Foolish because we have not yet any indication that victory will be ours. And to commit us to independence when the outcome of the war is still in complete doubt is dangerous. We have no foreign allies to help us. We have not won in open combat with the enemy. We have not even formed proper articles of confederation. This Congress is not even a legally constituted government yet. We have not the authority. We have not the need. And in fact, we have great need not to commit ourselves irrevocably to a path that may well lead to our destruction. We have a duty to the people we represent. Though all men in America clamored for independence, yet it is our duty not just to be the mouthpiece of our constituents, but to represent them according to our wisdom and conscience. In good conscience, can we approve a document that increases our dangers and yet gives not one benefit to the people, save a single weak gesture of defiance? If you love this country and hope for its future, you will vote against this declaration at this time.
Is there no one willing to answer Mr. Dickinson?
Mr. President.
Mr. Adams of Massachusetts.
No one admires Mr. Dickinson more than I. Our months of opposition on this question have taught me that Mr. Dickinson is a man of honor and good conscience. I do not believe him to be wicked in his opposition to the Declaration. I simply believe him to be wrong. I know him to be wrong. Without this declaration, we are not free to enter into foreign alliance. Without it, we are not free to organize and confederate these several colonies into United States. Above all, without this declaration, we will remain Englishmen caught up in a civil war. With it, we are free American citizens fighting for our rights and liberties against a foreign invader. Yes, it is dangerous. But can anyone pretend that the danger will increase from these words here written? The danger is already upon us. Let us then declare the reason why we are eager to fight and willing to die in defense of our rights. If we fail, let this declaration be our epitaph. But if Almighty God gives us the victory, then let this declaration stand as the foundation, not the afterthought, of our struggle.
Gentlemen, it is time to vote. New Hampshire.
Aye.
Massachusetts.
Aye.
Rhode Island.
Aye.
Connecticut.
Aye.
New York.
Mr. President, the entire New York delegation longs to vote yes, but we have not been granted the authority. Our grant comes from a convention that was held a year ago when all talk was of reconciliation, not independence. please allow us to postpone our vote for as many days as it takes for the new convention to authorize it, as it surely will to vote yes.
If there is no objection, New York will be permitted to postpone its vote. So recorded. New Jersey?
Aye.
Pennsylvania?
Pennsylvania votes no.
Delaware?
Mr. President, since there are only 2 delegates from Delaware at the present moment and we are of opposite opinions, Delaware cannot cast a vote either way.
That's an interesting dilemma. Delaware votes maybe. Maryland?
Aye.
Virginia?
Aye.
North Carolina?
Aye.
South Carolina?
No.
Georgia?
Aye.
The resolution has passed.
Mr. President?
Mr. Rutledge of South Carolina.
Before we vote on the declaration as a Congress, could we have another 2 days postponement?
Not again.
I beg your pardon, Mr. Adams. We want the postponement because the South Carolina delegation, in the interest of presenting a united country in our struggle against Britain, may well decide to change its vote to yes.
Is there any objection? If not, we'll take up the matter again on July 3rd.
In the 2 days after the first vote, the South Carolina delegation did indeed change its vote. A 3rd delegate was sent for from Delaware, and that colony also voted for independence. And 1 delegate from Pennsylvania changed his vote, so that even John Dickinson's delegation voted for the Declaration. Only New York withheld its vote, though only a short time after the delegation received instructions to vote for independence. On July 4th, 1776, every delegate in Congress except John Dickinson stepped forward to sign the Declaration.
John Hancock. Now, how's that for a signature, gentlemen? That's one that King George can read without his glasses.
Remember, gentlemen, as we sign this document, we are no longer the Congress of the United Colonies. We are the Congress of the United States of America. Let the world listen. There is a new order among nations from this day on.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Your Lordship. Good morning.
The morning will not get better by repeating how good it is. You will inform General Dartmouth that I am here.
Of course, Your Lordship. At once. General Dartmouth, Lord North is here.
Never mind, boy. I'm here myself.
Good morning, Lord North. You may go, Peter. And Sir George Germain. I take it that you have at last won the office you have been bucking for during all these months. Mine.
Yours no longer, General Dartmouth. Your reluctance to take the actions necessary to defeat the American rebels has led to a ridiculous prolongation of what should have been a quick and efficient war. Therefore, His Majesty's government has decided to replace you with Sir George Germain, who has declared himself willing to obey His Majesty's command that we take any action that will distress America.
Do what you like. I am delighted to lose an office in which I am forced to attack good Englishmen whose only crime was wishing to be treated decently.
His Majesty has declared these rebellious Americans to be our enemies.
Well, then, he has done their work for them, hasn't he?
What do you mean?
They have no need to proclaim their independence from Great Britain, have they?
The king has already proclaimed them independent.
Never.
Well, they can't be subjects and enemies at the same time, can they? The policy of this government has long been to treat them like a conquered nation, rather than our own brothers with only a trivial ocean dividing us. If we had treated them like our brothers, they would not be killing our soldiers, nor we theirs.
Your gray hairs, sir, protect you from being charged with treason for those words.
And your obvious stupidity protects you from being charged with murderous malice. What will you do now, Sir George? Hire mercenary troops? Send Russians or Germans to fight against the Americans? Because good Englishmen cannot bring themselves to kill Americans?
Unfortunately, we could not get Russian troops.
The Empress Catherine of Russia shows better sense than certain English politicians. She is wiser than to let her soldiers die in such a foolish cause.
Ah, but Hesse Castle is allowing us to hire 7,000 recruits.
So you will send Hessians to fight for England against Englishmen. Shame, shame on you.
No wonder we were losing the war. Well, I have no qualms about doing what must be done. The American army must be destroyed. The countryside that feeds and supplies their army must be burned over. We must treat the women and children of America as hostages to bring their husbands home from that traitorous army. If they insist on committing treason, let them at least have no doubt about the price the traitors pay.
Excellent.
Of course, there will be a price for us to pay as well. An effective war will be expensive, and our soldiers will suffer.
If we suffer, we shall at least have the satisfaction of making the Americans suffer more.
Good morning.
Mrs. Adams, I'm General Washington. Good morning.
General Washington. Oh, come in. Come in, but you must forgive me. The house is not fit. Well, the British Army, you know.
I know. They were stabling their horses in the North Church. Anything they could do to show their contempt for us.
I'm afraid they knew this was the home of John Adams, one of their chiefest enemies.
In that case, the more deplorable the condition of your house, the greater the honor.
I shall remember the honor as I spend the next few months trying to repair the damage.
I must confess, I came to call on you in good part because of plain curiosity.
Curiosity?
Your husband is an utter bore, Mrs. Adams, because he can talk about only two things, independence and Abigail.
Oh.
His mind is entirely on the former, and his heart entirely on the latter.
I cannot help but be glad to hear it.
Well, I assure you that his obsessions have made him quite obnoxious to everyone. But now that I have met you myself, I can understand his devotion to you.
And now that I have met you and seen how brilliantly you have out-generaled the British...
On the contrary, they out-generaled me.
What? When you forced them to withdraw from Boston?
I did not want them to withdraw. I wanted to capture or destroy Howe's army. Instead, he gave me a clear choice. Either I let him withdraw, or he would make a massacre of the city of Boston.
He wouldn't have attacked civilians.
Unfortunately, I have to believe that he would. Among all my other disadvantages, this is the one that weakens me most. While he can destroy anything he pleases, I am bound to protect Americans. I fear that I shall pay on other battlefields for having saved Boston.
What a terrible choice.
Apparently, I made the right one. Harvard has conferred an honorary doctor's degree upon me, and Congress struck a medal in my honor.
And you deserve it.
In 6 months, we'll see how they feel about it. We had every advantage in Boston. In New York, we shall have none.
New York?
It's the obvious place for them to attack next. If they can take New York, they'll be able to cut the colonies in half, striking into New England or Pennsylvania at will. And they will take New York.
What?
It's an island. They have a fleet. They can land troops anywhere. There aren't enough men in my army to defend the entire coastline. It's not a matter of whether they will take New York. It's only a matter of when, and how many of my men will die, and how many of theirs in the battle.
You make it sound so hopeless.
Do I? No, Mrs. Adams, there is hope. If the American people become unified in this war, if soldiers stay in the army instead of going home whenever they can, If Congress can decide whether we're fighting for independence or reconciliation, and if the British commanders are reasonably stupid, which they have shown themselves to be so far, then we have a good chance of holding out until France or Spain or Holland or someone with a fleet and an army comes to our rescue.
General Washington, you must not be so pessimistic. We have more going for us than you think.
Do we?
We're fighting for our freedom against an enemy who's merely fighting out of petulance. Or for money, if they can send their foreign mercenaries against us. God in heaven will strengthen us.
I was already adding him into my calculations. If God were not on our side, we would have lost this war last year. But we do have another secret strength.
What is it?
You, madam. You and all the other good people of this colony. As long as you believe in us, we will believe in ourselves. And we can go on. The fact that you can come into a house that looks like this and not despair, not weep.
Oh, I have shed a few tears, General Washington.
But no one has seen those tears. Even to your husband, you show only strength and courage. That is what will give us the victory. I must go now. There's work to be done in New York if I'm to accomplish anything there at all.
Thank you for calling on me, General Washington.
And when you write to your husband,
yes,
tell him that Congress had better hurry and declare independence now, while everyone still believes in victory. Until we have declared ourselves not to be Englishmen anymore, we tie our hands behind our backs.
I'll tell him. Though in truth, I think he's already worn himself out fighting for independence.
Worn himself out. He doesn't know what weariness is yet. None of us knows, I'm afraid.
God bless you, General Washington.
And you, Mrs. Adams.
Why do I let myself come to these church services, Sam?
Because your soul cries out for religion. Better the Anglican Church than those barbarous little meetings the Quakers call worship.
What common meeting ground do we have with any of these people?
What do you mean?
Well, the Southerners are all Anglicans, those that aren't half atheists.
Now, John.
Maryland are Catholics, Pennsylvania Quakers. Heaven only knows what New Yorkers worship.
It's rumored they have heard of God there, too.
And it isn't just religion. The Southerners have their slaves.
They're slaves everywhere.
The Southerners make a virtue of it. We of New England have our ships. And the people of the Middle all seem to look westward with longing, as if there weren't enough land here for all our needs. How can we be one nation, Sam? No.
Listen.
And my son has been writing home the saddest letters.
No.
He says that not a day goes by but some soldier in General Washington's army makes some crude remark about his majesty, as if he were not still our king.
Deplorable. There seems to be some confusion about what we're fighting for.
Confusion? Chaos would be a better word.
We have an American army fortifying New York against invasion. Our men have died in Massachusetts and in Canada. The British threaten every port from Boston to Savannah, and they're stirring up the Indians out west. How can anyone think that we still owe some shred of loyalty to the king?
Nevertheless, they think it, because we have not told them otherwise.
I've been talking my lungs out, demanding that we behave like a nation.
Now you've been talking to Congress.
I'd have better luck talking to shellfish. At least when they open their mouths, it has some purpose. Unlike some congressmen whose names I shall not mention.
Well, the time is ripe, John. Congress has resisted declaring independence, but now the people want it too. And what the people want, eventually their delegates will do.
So you think the people...
The people of these colonies have been reading Tom Paine's pamphlet.
Thomas Paine. What did he say in Common Sense that I haven't been saying for years?
And what have you said that I wasn't saying when you were in diapers?
Well, Sam...
Tom Paine has got the common people saying not just that we ought to have our liberty, but saying that there ought to be no king in America. No king at all. And the moment we declare the same, this war is not a civil war between Englishmen anymore. It's a revolution.
And the common soldiers won't be fighting so a king will have more power, or a rich lord more land. They'll be fighting so they can have rights and freedoms and...
Votes.
Well, we aren't going to give the vote to every Tom, Dick, and Harry, I should hope.
I can't see why not.
Well, I can.
We'll argue about it later.
It's all pointless, Sam. We'll never get a Declaration of Independence through Congress.
And why not?
They won't listen to me.
Why not have Ben Franklin write it?
Well, they don't trust him either. The Southerners and John Dickinson of Pennsylvania, too, of course, and...
Oh, I know. A bunch of stand-patters and status quos if there ever were any. They're afraid of us Yankees anyway. We don't like slavery.
Barbarism. That's what it is.
Barbarism or not, John, we need the southern colonies if we're to make a go of independence.
How can we get them?
Well, for starters, why not have the Declaration written by a Southerner?
A Virginian.
Patrick Henry.
No. He's a speaker, a homespun orator. Imagine his country language in a document of state.
Randolph's gone home.
No, it's Jefferson.
Young Tom. Doesn't say much.
But he writes. Have you read any of his treatises?
No, not many. Actually, not any.
Well, I thought I was an elegant writer, but his writing is reasonable, persuasive, brilliantly intelligent.
I might do, then. In the meantime, I shall be collecting as much support as I can from every colony whose delegates seem doubtful. If they start claiming that their people aren't ready for independence, I intend to have enough contrary evidence to make them eat their words.
You old conniver.
Thank you. But you know, John, after people get tricked into voting for a good thing, they always spend the rest of their lives pretending that they knew what they were doing all along and meant to vote my way from the start. You watch. That's what they'll do.
William Ellery. William Ellery, welcome to Philadelphia.
Stephen Hopkins, I was beginning to think you had ceased to exist.
Well, I practically have. Philadelphia is miserably hot. It's too far from the ocean. I miss Rhode Island.
And Rhode Island misses you. I have the documents here. I've been named to fill the vacancy caused by the death of our dear friend, Governor Ward.
Well, I'm sorry to hear the place was vacant. I'm glad you were named to fill it. Come in. There's got to be something cool in the cellar.
I have instructions to the delegation from the General Assembly.
I hope you're going to tell me they voted for independency.
Well, not precisely.
Well,
No. It's all right. We have full authority.
Jesse, would you bring the lemonade to my room? And what would you like?
I should like it to be autumn, but I'll settle for lemonade.
A pitcher of lemonade, Jesse, and 2 glasses.
Our official instructions tell us to consult and advise with the delegates of the other colonies in Congress upon the most proper measures to secure the said colonies their rights and liberties, whether by entering into treaties or by such other prudent and effectual ways and means as shall be devised and agreed upon.
Well, that gives us the authority to sell Rhode Island to the Ottoman Turks if we wanted to.
Well, the lower house passed a measure proclaiming Rhode Island independent of the crown, but the upper house would have passed it too, except that there were some towns that would have loudly opposed it. And we didn't want to make a public impression of disunity, so they decided to give the authority to us and let Congress do it for them.
Bravely done. It doesn't occur to them how much easier our job would be if a majority of the colonies declared independence on their own.
They don't want to become independent on their own. They want independence from England, but interdependence with all the other colonies. All the colonies, Stephen. If we show ourselves anything but completely united, the British will be so encouraged that the war could go on forever. They'll divide us if they can. We must therefore be...
united.
That'll be the lemonade.
Come in.
Sorry I'm not the lemonade. But I did tell Jessie to get a 3rd glass. For me. You don't mind, do you?
Of course not. Ben, you're looking terribly old and tired.
And you are at death's door, Mr. Hopkins. We are the ancient ones. Why are we so much more radical than these young men?
Simple. We're not afraid of hanging. Death doesn't terrify us old relics the way it does these young boys.
Young boys? I'll be 50 next year.
Nevertheless, William, whatever mistakes I make in this Congress, you're the one who'll have to live with them. I'll be dead before anyone catches on how inept I was.
You will live forever.
Well, Is Rhode Island for independency?
Yes, cautiously.
Cautiously. 10,000 soldiers in New York waiting to fight off a British invasion. 1,000 British graves already dug here in America, but we are cautious. We wouldn't want to offend the English now, would we?
And how goes it with the rest of the colonies?
All New England is squarely for independency.
What about the middle colonies?
Oh, they're of two minds about it. For instance, the instructions from the Maryland Assembly were so precious that I committed them to memory and quote them whenever I wish to provoke laughter. We instruct you that you do not assent to any proposition to declare the colonies independent, unless, in your judgments, it shall be thought absolutely necessary for the preservation of the liberties of the United Colonies. And then, of course, if their delegation votes for independence, they reserve the right to change their minds afterward.
Well, they'll be ready to stand on the winning side no matter which side wins.
It's my own delegation that causes me grief. Pennsylvania ought to be squarely for independence, but John Dickinson.
Ah, yes, John Dickinson.
Well, Dickinson or not, we begin the battle tomorrow.
Battle, Mr. Franklin?
Richard Lee of Virginia has agreed to introduce a motion for a declaration of independence. And this time we'll get it taken seriously or die trying.
You sound determined, Mr. Franklin.
Governor Ward's death reminded me of my own advancing age. I wish to see America a free and independent nation before I die. It gives me a sense of urgency, gentlemen. Oh, where is that lemonade?
You must understand, it isn't independence itself that I oppose, or I believe, does any of us who have spoken against the measure. But the people of the middle colonies are not yet ripe for severing our connection with Britain. Give us a little more time. Postpone this decision. Some of our assemblies have in fact forbidden us to consent to such a declaration. We should not declare independence here and force it upon the people. We should, in fact, make it plain that the will of the people has forced independence upon us.
May I also remind the Congress that the Assembly of Pennsylvania is about to meet, tomorrow in fact, and the Assembly of New York within the week, and the New Jersey and Delaware counties will be meeting next Monday. Let's give them a fair chance to decide about independence and notify this Congress.
Mr. President. Mr. John Adams of Massachusetts. I know you are weary of hearing me speak on this subject. I think it is odd that while none of the gentlemen of this Congress has so much as questioned the propriety, nay, the need for a formal declaration of our independence, yet they still urge a course of action that is tantamount to rejection. For every day of delay is perceived as indecision, division, uncertainty, fear, even cowardice.
Mr. President,
Mr. Wythe of Virginia.
as usual, John Adams has provided us with a calm, reasonable approach to the matter. But I must agree with him. The question is not whether, by declaring our independence, we should make ourselves something that we are not already. The question is whether we should simply declare a fact which already exists. We have always been independent of the people and Parliament of England. We only obeyed their laws because we thought them reasonably fair. We have always depended on our own taxes and our own assemblies to build our roads, defend our people, try our criminals, and all the other proper and reasonable acts of government. We have been independent from the beginning. As to the king, we did give allegiance to him, but he has dissolved that allegiance by declaring us to be his enemies. Gentlemen, There are only 2 colonies whose delegates don't already have full authority to act. And even they only have to get approval from their assemblies after they act. There is no reason for delay.
Mr. President, Mr. Rutledge of South Carolina.
Gentlemen, even if we only think there's a reason to delay, that in itself is reason enough to delay. I move that we delay voting on this motion until 3 weeks from now, the 1st of July.
Mr. President, in order not to lose any time, while we are delaying, let us at least have a committee to write the declaration, so we know what we're voting on when the time comes.
I accept that.
What? An agreement between Mr. Rutledge and Mr. Franklin? Why, this calls for a vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Do I hear nominations for the committee?
I nominate Thomas Jefferson of Virginia.
Me? Jefferson?
Mr. Jefferson has been nearly silent throughout these proceedings, but in committee he has been dedicated and insightful, and his writings are a credit to any man. He is also taking notes on the proceedings and may well be the only person who understands what is going on in this Congress. I think he should not only be on the committee, but chairman of it.
Second.
What are you doing to me, Mr. Adams?
I believe I am serving on a committee with you, Mr. Jefferson.
What am I supposed to do?
Write a Declaration of Independence, of course. All I ask is that it be brilliant, and that it be written in such language that it will be accepted unanimously by this Congress.
God help me, Mr. Adams. No man can write such a document.
I imagine God will help you, Mr. Jefferson. I'll even suggest an idea from time to time. Good day.